Have you ever woken up and just sat there, staring out the window, asking yourself, how did life start to feel so quiet? Not in a peaceful way, not in the restful kind of quiet, but in the heavy kind, the kind that settles in your chest and makes you wonder when the energy, the spark, the sense of purpose began to fade. There's something about crossing into this stage of life after the careers have slowed down, the house has emptied, and the children, now grown, have lives of their own that brings you face to face with a different kind of question. How do I keep going strong when everything around me is slowing down? You're still here. You're still breathing. You're still thinking, feeling, remembering. You've built a life. You've held families together, given more than you've ever asked for in return. And yet, so often, people your age are treated like you're winding down, like you've already had your time. But that's not what life is asking of you now. Now, life is asking for something deeper. Not more work, not more giving, not more proving. It's asking for something simpler, but stronger. It's asking you to live, not just exist, not just go through the motions, but live with the kind of quiet power that says, I still matter, I still have strength, I still have light. And what I want to share with you is that there are habits, small, daily habits that help you hold on to that light. Not the kind of habits that require you to change everything overnight. Not the kind that make you feel like you're falling behind if you miss a day. But the kind that build you back up, one quiet breath at a time. Let me tell you about Lucas. Lucas is 67, retired teacher. Vidover, the kind of man who never missed a single parent-teacher conference. Never forgot a student's name. But after he lost his wife, and after retirement gave him long, empty days, he started to feel like he was drifting. The structure was gone, the routine, the purpose, the laughter around the dinner table. What saved Lucas wasn't some big project. It wasn't a trip or a new romance. It was the simple act of getting up every day and walking just 20 minutes around his neighborhood. He told me, I didn't even feel like putting on my shoes some mornings, but I promised myself I'd go, even just around the block. At first, it was about moving his body, but over time, it became something more. He started noticing things, the rustling of the trees, the morning light on a neighbor's fence, the way his breath found a rhythm again. And then, a funny thing happened. He started smiling more. His posture changed. People started greeting him. You're out early today, Lucas. And one day, a woman who'd seen him walking every morning stopped to say hello. That turned into coffee. Coffee turned into conversation. Conversation turned into friendship. That's what the first habit is really about. Moving with purpose. Not for weight loss, not for numbers, but to remind your body and your soul, I'm still here. I still move forward. It's easy to feel like we don't belong in our bodies anymore as we age. The aches come more often. The pace slows. But every time you walk, stretch, dance, or even just sway to music in the kitchen, you're telling yourself that your body is not done being lived in. It's still your home. And that brings me to something Madeline once shared. She's 74 now. She used to be a nurse, always taking care of others. But now, in her quiet apartment, no one really needs her. That word need can feel like a loss after a life of giving. So she started tending to plants. Just a few at first. A pothos, a small violet. She said, they didn't need much, but they needed me. Watering them became her ritual, her grounding. She'd check the leaves, adjust the sunlight, talk to them softly as she wiped away dust. Over time, her windowsill turned into a small jungle of life, and that jungle turned into a kind of mirror. If they could keep growing, she said, so could I, and she was right. That's the second habit. Nurturing something, anything with tenderness. It might be plants. It might be a pet. It might be a journal, or even just your morning tea. Something that reminds you, you are still a caretaker, not in the exhausting, endless way you once were, but in the nourishing, gentle way that feeds you as well. And it's not about being productive. It's about being present, because presence is where strength lives, not in how much you can lift, but in how deeply you can feel your own moments, even the quiet ones. Then there's Owen. Owen, cheptompe, used to love music, played piano in his younger days, but somewhere along the way, work, family, responsibilities, he stopped. I didn't have time, he said. But after a health scare last year, he found himself sitting in his old garage, staring at the dusty keyboard he'd packed away. He touched one key, then another. It wasn't perfect. His fingers were slower, but something inside him stirred. Now, every Thursday afternoon, he plays, not for anyone, not for applause, just for himself. That's the third habit I want to share. Returning to something that once brought you joy. Not to be good at it again, not to perform, just to remember what it feels like to be lit up from the inside. Because here's the thing, the world might forget your song, but your soul never does. And when you play it, however imperfectly, it remembers. You'd be surprised how often strength has nothing to do with muscles. Sometimes, it's in the quietest choices, the moments no one sees, the times you whisper to yourself, I'm worth showing up for, even when no one else is watching. That's the kind of strength that carries you forward, not in a blaze of glory, but in a gentle, steady glow. But let's be honest, that glow is hard to hold on to when you've spent most of your life tending to others. And now, it feels like no one is really tending to you. It's not something people talk about often, the way so many seniors quietly feel like they've been put on a shelf, not out of malice, but because the world moves fast. And we've somehow decided that after a certain age, people no longer have dreams, or feelings, or a voice that deserves to be heard. That's how people like Natalie begin to disappear in their own lives. She's 69, used to be the family glue, the one who remembered every birthday, cooked every meal, called to check in on everyone else's problems. But now, the phone hardly rings. The holidays feel more like obligations than celebrations. And somewhere deep down, Natalie started to believe that maybe she just didn't matter as much anymore. That belief, that subtle, creeping sense of being less needed, less seen isn't just sad, it's dangerous because it leads to disconnection. Not just from others, but from yourself. But Natalie did something brave. She got tired of waiting. One evening, after a particularly lonely dinner, she picked up her journal and wrote 3 words. I miss me. That sentence became a turning point. Not because she did anything grand the next day, but because she remembered that the most important relationship she ever had was the one with herself. She started having a little coffee date every morning. Just her and her thoughts. No guilt, no rushing, just presence. And that's where the 4th habit lives. Reclaiming your attention. Not giving it all away to the news, or social media, or someone else's story, but giving it fully, kindly to yourself. For some, that looks like journaling. For others, it's prayer, or slow breathing, or sitting in silence while watching the light dance across the wall. It doesn't matter how it looks. What matters is that you show up for it. Because when you stop paying attention to your own life, your life stops feeling like yours. And when you begin again, when you return to your own inner world, you'll notice something. Your needs are not as complicated as you feared. Often, they're simple: to feel valued, to feel connected, to feel alive. That's when you realize so much of what hurts us isn't what happens to us. It's what we stop doing for ourselves. And that leads us into something a little harder. But even more important, let's talk about boundaries. It's a heavy word, I know, but boundaries aren't about building walls. They're about building clarity. They help you protect the very peace you've worked so hard to find. Henry, for example, is 72. He loves his family, but he found himself drained after every visit. His adult children would show up, stay for hours, leave messes, and sometimes even argue in front of him. He stayed quiet, smiled politely, told himself, at least they came. But inside, he felt invisible in his own home. So one day, Henry did something different. He told his son, gently but firmly, I love when you visit, but I need the house to stay calm. And I'd appreciate it if we cleaned up before heading out. It wasn't easy. His son was taken aback. But you know what? He listened. And the next time, the visit ended with hugs and a clean kitchen, because Henry didn't shout. He didn't blame. He just stood in his truth with kindness. That's what a boundary really is. A statement of self-respect. A way of saying, I love you, and I also love me. When you start doing this, the world doesn't always clap for you. Some people may push back, but the ones who truly love you, they adjust, they grow, they learn, and even more importantly, you begin to feel safe in your own space again. Boundaries aren't selfish, they're sacred. They protect your energy, your time, your joy, and joy. Joy needs protection, because in this season of life, joy doesn't always knock loudly. Sometimes it whispers. A bird at your window, a song you forgot you loved, the scent of your old cologne, the laughter of a grandchild, the feeling of warm sunlight through the curtain. But you only hear that whisper when your soul is quiet enough, when you've turned down the volume of guilt, of people-pleasing, of always saying yes when your heart is begging you to say no. Lucas, who started walking after retirement, told me that peace didn't come all at once. At first, he said, I walked just to get out of the house. But over time, I realized I wasn't walking away from anything. I was walking back to myself. That's the quiet shift. The subtle change, when you stop chasing youth and start embracing your presence. When you stop trying to be everything for everyone and start being enough for yourself. When you stop running and start standing still with full attention and a soft heart. And you'll begin to notice it in the way you breathe, in the way your shoulders relax, in how the loneliness doesn't sting quite as much, because you've started keeping you company again. And maybe, just maybe, that's where true strength begins. Have you ever noticed how the world responds differently when you carry yourself with quiet assurance? Not arrogance, not pride, just a calm, steady presence that says, I know who I am, I know what I need, and I honor it. It's something that doesn't have to be announced. It's felt in the way you speak, in the way you move through a room, in the way you don't rush to fill silence or fix everyone else's mood. That presence, it's magnetic, especially as you grow older, especially when others have grown used to seeing you as always available, always agreeable, always putting yourself last. But then, something changes. And it doesn't take a dramatic speech or a grand gesture. It might be something as small as pausing before you say yes, or smiling and saying, not today, but thank you for thinking of me. That's all it takes to begin living the strength you've been building on the inside. Let me tell you about Abigail. She's 71. For most of her life, she put everyone first. Kids, grandkids, her late husband, even her friends. She'd drop everything the moment someone needed something. She thought it was love, and in many ways, it was, but it came at a cost. She hadn't painted in over 30 years, and she used to love it, got lost in it. But there was always something else to do, someone else to take care of. Until one day, she looked around her quiet house and said, if I don't pick up a brush now, I never will. So she set up a small space by the window, bought some paints. At first, it felt strange, clumsy. Her hands didn't move the way they used to, but little by little, the color returned not just to the canvas, but to her life. Her daughter came to visit one weekend and saw one of the pieces drying near the light. Mom, did you paint that? She asked, surprised. And in that moment, something shifted, because Abigail wasn't just a helper or a caretaker anymore. She was a person again, a woman with talent, with dreams, with a life beyond her roles. That's the kind of shift that happens when you start reclaiming your passions, not for anyone's approval, but because they are part of you. And when you do, people begin to notice. They may not say it out loud, but they feel it. Owen, who had started playing piano again, said something that struck me deeply. I used to wait for people to call. Now, they ask when they can come hear me play. Not because he asked them to, but because when he started doing what made him feel alive, it pulled others in naturally. That's how respect returns. Not through correction, but through embodiment. When your children see you making time for yourself, they realize they have to respect your time, too. When your friends see you honoring your energy, they stop assuming you'll always say yes. When you stop giving everything away, the people around you start learning to give back. It's not about revenge. It's about balance. It's about finally stepping into a season of life where you're not defined by how much you sacrifice, but by how deeply you live. And that brings us to one more habit. One that may sound too simple to matter, but might be the most powerful of all. Speak kindly to yourself, every day, out loud. It could be in the mirror. It could be during your morning tea. It could be in the way you gently correct that inner critic that says, "You're too old to start that," or "No one cares what you have to say anymore." Because here's the truth, someone does care. You, and that matters. Nathan, a retired bus driver, used to tell himself all the time, "I'm just in the way now." He didn't even realize he was saying it. It became automatic after a slow step, a forgotten word, a missed call. But one day, he caught himself and said, "No, I'm not in the way. I'm on my way." That one shift became a ritual. Every morning, he'd look out his kitchen window and say, "I'm on my way." It didn't mean rushing. It didn't mean fixing. It just meant forward, alive, still moving. You don't need to be loud to be heard. You don't need to prove your value to be valuable. You don't need to be younger to be worthy of joy. What you need is presence, attention, and the grace to give those things to yourself. And when you do, when you live these habits not as tasks, but as acts of love, your world begins to soften. Not because everything around you changes, but because you do, and from that shift, something else begins to grow. Peace. The kind of peace that isn't shaken by a missed call or an empty weekend. The kind of peace that lets you sit with yourself and feel full. The kind that makes you glow a little brighter when you enter a room. The kind of peace that says, "I've lived, I'm still living, and I intend to live well." So if you ever find yourself wondering whether it's too late to begin again, let me offer this. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are right on time for the life you're still meant to live. Thank you, truly. Thank you for sitting with me through all of this. I know it's not always easy to reflect on where we are in life, especially when the world often acts like we've already had our moment. But what if the truth is, your moment is still unfolding? What if these quieter years, these seemingly smaller days, are actually where your deepest strength begins to shine? If you've been listening, and something inside you stirred a memory, a longing, maybe even a tear, then you're not alone. You're part of a quiet, powerful community of people who are choosing to keep showing up for themselves. Even now, especially now, because after 60, you're not winding down. You're waking up to a new kind of life, one that's no longer defined by how fast you move or how much you do, but by how deeply you feel and how fully you live. Maybe you've been through seasons of being needed constantly by your kids, your partner, your work, your friends, and maybe now you're in a season of stillness. But that doesn't mean you've stopped mattering. It means you've entered a chapter where your life no longer belongs to everyone else. It belongs to you again. That can feel scary at first, unfamiliar, even lonely. But it's also freeing, because now you get to decide what fills your days. You get to choose what you nurture, how you move, what you return to, and how you speak to yourself. You get to live on your own terms, not out of rebellion, but out of deep, quiet wisdom. And if any part of this message made you feel seen, I want to invite you to keep this conversation going. Would you be willing to share your story in the comments? Has your relationship with aging shifted in recent years? Have you picked up any habits that bring you joy, calm, or purpose? Or maybe, are you still figuring out what this chapter of life looks like for you? Wherever you are, I promise you, this space is safe. It's not about having the right answer or the perfect words. It's about being real, being honest, being human, because when you share your story, you remind someone else that they're not alone. You might be the reason another person takes a walk tomorrow, or picks up a paintbrush, or finally tells themselves, "I am not done living yet." And if this message touched something in you, if it gave you clarity, or peace, or just a moment of warmth, I'd be so grateful if you chose to subscribe to this channel. Not because I need numbers or praise, but because I want us to keep walking together. There's something powerful about being reminded, regularly, that your life still holds beauty, that your voice still matters, that your days, even the quiet ones, still carry meaning. And that's what I hope this space becomes for you. Not just a video, but a soft place to land, a breath, a mirror, a reminder. You are not a burden. You are not too late. You are not done becoming. So if today you made your tea slowly, or stood in the sunshine for a minute longer, or said no to something that drained you, or yes to something that lit you up, even just a little, then I'm proud of you. You are living proof that growing older doesn't mean growing dimmer. You are allowed to rest and still radiate. You are allowed to begin again at 60, 70, at 60, or beyond. You are allowed to fall in love with the world, with a song, with your own breath, with life itself. And most of all, you are allowed to matter. Even when no one calls, even when the calendar is blank, even when the mirror shows new lines, or your body moves slower, you still carry stories the world needs. You still bring presence to a room. You still have something inside you, something steady, something shining. So thank you for being here, for choosing to listen, not just to me, but to the voice inside you that's quietly whispering, "I'm still here, and I still want to live." I hope you'll come back again soon. But even if you don't, please remember this. You don't need to be younger to feel strong. You don't need to be busy to feel valuable. And you don't need anyone's permission to live the rest of your life as deeply and as beautifully as you choose. Stay well, stay soft, and stay strong in your way. You deserve nothing less.